The two most important decisions we make in life are 1. Who will I marry? And 2. How will I make money? These are big questions with far-reaching consequences that last for years after you actually make the decision. Questions about money and love. They determine how you end up living the rest of your life. They lead to webs of complications and subtleties that were not exactly obvious to the teenage version of you that had to make these decisions. But eventually you grow up and your naivety falters. You learn and grow. Nuance gets introduced into your mind. Imagine that. Every single decision comes with at least 3 other complications. Every little thing you have to consider weighs heavily on your mind. And one day, you lose your naivety and become quite cynical. But what if you never lost that naivety? What if you spent your whole life in pursuit of a dream, that being so seemingly in reach, but still quite far away? That's what happened to Mr. Gatsby, a man who defined his life by his dream, and how that dream led to his ruin. Well, if you know my channel, it's probably a bit weird for me to be talking about a classic book here. Even less a book that's the bane of many a young high schooler. That's right, gamers. I lured you in with the anime BS. Now it's time for some real shit. I think the truths that the book is trying to tell are not really something a high schooler would understand. You need a little experience in life to really get it. A little more nuance, of which high schoolers are famous for their lack of. And I'm not going to say that my perspective on this story is final. I'm not 30 yet, as many of the characters in the story are. But maybe when I am, my perspective will shift even more. But first, a quick recap of the plot for those who haven't heard of, or maybe just forgot the story. Full spoilers ahead, by the way. Watch out. The main character of The Great Gatsby is Gatsby. No, because that would make too much sense. It's actually a third wheel who's very much just a bystander for the whole plot of the book. Nick Carraway. He's just kinda there. He's like the audience peering into the inner lives of these people, making judgments and delivering on the themes of the book through changes in himself. Meeting Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom changes Nick. His little escapade into the lives of the ultra-rich in America makes him draw interesting conclusions by the end of the book. They're not exactly clear to the high school mind. Like many a young man, Nick moves to New York, looking to make riches and propel his life into a new social class. It just so happens that his rich cousin, Daisy Buchanan, lives there as well, with her husband Tom. It's on a visit with Daisy that Nick meets Jordan Baker, a woman of similar wealth class as Daisy, whom Nick falls into a sort of casual romance with. While Nick is on the visit, it seems clear that Tom and Daisy are having some relationship troubles, to put it lightly. Tom quite likes Nick and invites him to the city to have a drink with him and his mistress, a woman named Myrtle Wilson. Myrtle lived with a man who owned a very simple car shop, and she was clearly desperate for another man, other than her downer of her husband, George Wilson. One day, Nick ventures to meet his neighbor, who throws some of the most extravagant parties in the East. His name is Great Gatsby, a man who seemingly came out of nowhere into great riches. This is the subject of many a rumor among the partygoers. Gatsby gives off the impression of a man who only says what he thinks he wants you to hear. Basically, the man was very fake, and Nick clearly does not like him at all, at least not at first. But Gatsby and Jordan Baker together ask Nick if he would be willing to bring Daisy and Gatsby together for a little meeting. Turns out Gatsby and Daisy were lovers 5 years in the past, but circumstances ended up with Daisy marrying Tom instead of Gatsby. All of Gatsby's wealth and the extravagant parties he threw were for the sake of attracting Daisy's attention back to him, and it hadn't worked so far. Nick arranges a secret meeting between the two, which, while initially awkward, grows quite warm and loving. Gatsby shows Daisy all around his mansion and everything he collected in the 5 years he was gone. They continue to meet under Tom's nose for a while, but finally Tom and Gatsby talk, and get into a heated argument. Gatsby pleads with Daisy to admit that she never loved Tom, and that she was going to leave him for Gatsby. However, Daisy could never say that. She did love Tom once. Tom also did some digging and found that Gatsby's wealth was not exactly hard-won. He used some less than legal methods to get to his level of wealth. With all this relationship drama, you should remember that Nick and Jordan are just kinda there watching all this happen. Nick Carraway, he's just kinda there. With no conclusion reached, the group disbanded and head home, but Myrtle, Tom's mistress, mistakes Gatsby's car for Tom's car and attempts to run in front of it to talk to Tom. Unfortunately, Daisy was the one in the driving seat and Gatsby was the passenger. Together they did a hit and run and left Myrtle on the street to die. Tom came by later to see the scene, and he seems as distraught at her death as Wilson, Myrtle's husband. He tells Wilson that the killer was Gatsby, not knowing that the actual killer was Daisy. The night passes with everyone laying low, but in the morning, Gatsby's body is found dead, shot in his own pool by George Wilson. Soon after this, both Daisy and Tom disappear from New York with no prior notice. Nick is the only person left to pick up the pieces and clean up the mess. Nick arranges for a funeral for Gatsby, for which only a few people show up. in stark contrast to the large number of people who used to attend his parties. Even Gatsby's own business partners refused to come. At the funeral, Nick meets Gatsby's father, at which time it's revealed that Gatsby was actually the son of a farmer. He left his dad's farm to win it big in the big city, and later to win Daisy's affection. He used self-improvement strategies that would not be uncommon on a modern-day motivational YouTube video. He seemed fake because his personality was fake. He never told anyone where he actually came from, trying to maintain the image of J. Gatsby, the man with the most handsome suits in the East, and who threw the biggest parties along the coast. In the end, Nick breaks up with Jordan, in case you forgot, they're in the story too. Then he reminisces about how Gatsby must have felt, having his goal so close yet so far. Daisy lived just across the bay, a simple body of water, but she was infinitely far away. That is what Gatsby wanted in the end, to bridge the gap between the two social classes. That dream ended in his death, and that's it for the recap. Not exactly a happy story, hey? The Great Gatsby is a story about the rich and the opulent, people for which money is no issue, the lives of those atop our society. The story is a small glimpse into their world, interesting to watch from the perspective of the layman. Weirdly, a popular type of story, huh? What does Fitzgerald think of the rich? Well, it's rather quite scathing. His commentary is that they're basically children. The money has gone to their heads and left them all childlike. It's not so much the money itself, but the fact that they can fulfill any base desire they have with a few throwaway bills. Extravagant parties and loveless marriages awry. Life out here is quite different. The people are often liars and pleasure seekers. Although they pretend to know you, they don't really. You are as interchangeable as the clothes they wear. Getting to know someone truly is looked down upon. Artificial connection is the limit to this life. That's if the people are ever sober enough to genuinely connect. But The Great Gatsby is also a story of love, and the interplay between wealth and love, the dynamics of it, and the dreams of the people within that broader social structure. Marriages are usually dry and for show. Even though these two people may be together, they're both longing for someone else. Myrtle and Daisy are contrasts of the same type of woman, except one settled for a man who could not afford luxury, while the other settled for a man who could. Here's a question for you. Should you marry for money, or should you marry for love? Ideally, both are included in that package, but let's say they were mutually exclusive and you had to choose only one. Which one would you pick? I'll give you a moment to pause and think about it. This was the question that both Myrtle and Daisy were faced with. And although it seems like an easy choice for us, I always choose for love. The irony here is that they're both unhappy in their marriages. In fact, it seemed like this was a false choice after all. There are no happy endings here. With time, all things fall apart, and the grass always seems greener on the other side. Myrtle, for one, has lost all respect for her husband. Trapped living out of a bungalow of a garage with nothing to her name, she lost all the luxuries of her youth to live with the man she loved, until she didn't love him anymore. Every single luxury she lost was a small breadcrumb of resentment that built up over the years until she blamed it all on her husband. Until the thrill of another man, a richer man, came along and stole her away. Daisy, on the other hand, has also lost all respect for her husband. Tom is no saint, and every couple of years he picks up a new mistress. The man might be richer than Wilson, but maybe not that much smarter. He picks up and reads complicated books, more to show off than to genuinely engage with the material. He tries hard to be liked by the people around him and throws money around like it's nothing. Daisy can see the flaws in his character and despises him for it. Their marriage had turned loveless many years ago. They rarely talk about their child, if at all, almost like she's an afterthought in their lives. Daisy may have every luxury, but she does not have the love of her husband. And in contrast, Gatsby represented that exciting time in her youth again. The accident was quite unfortunate, but really both Tom and Daisy were at fault for it. Clumsy people causing clumsy accidents. Tom pushes marriage to the breaking point by involving himself with another woman. Daisy was in an emotional state, and she asked to drive to help her calm herself down. She was the one that didn't stop for Myrtle, although who's to say that in her anger she recognized Myrtle and forgot to press the brakes. And Tom was the one who tipped Wilson off of who owned the car that killed Myrtle. The irony here being that Daisy killed Tom's girl and Tom indirectly killed Daisy's man. Real power couple here. Like most great stories, The Great Gatsby is a story about the death of innocence, the death of conceptions of true love and eternal happiness. The movie makes this theme quite explicit in the line, "Rich girls don't date poor boys." As far as I can tell, this was a line exclusive to the Baz Luhrmann film from 2013 and wasn't in the actual book. When you're young, you see the story as a tragic love story, like Romeo and Juliet or Titanic. But the older you get, the more nuance you see in it. As a kid, I saw Gatsby through the line of tragic romance. As a young adult, I see Gatsby through the frame of untamed ambition, and longing for those dreamy days as a teenager when anything seemed possible. Well, now I see it like this. Gatsby was a fool and stuck in the past, in a world of idealism. He represents the untamed ambition of youth, which is admirable, but still quite naive if taken too far. He had a vision for his life that unfortunately got him stuck in past victories and eventually led to his death. Daisy was a vapid materialist. Although she longed for love, she could never sacrifice her lifestyle for it. Her luxuries in life mattered to her more than anything else, even her honor as a person. Her expectations and dreams of married life were never quite met, and she suffered for it. Myrtle was the version of Daisy that actually married for love, but even that wasn't the answer. She longs for luxuries as much as Daisy does. The life she was forced to live makes her lose all respect for her husband and long for someone else to rescue her from her slum of a home. Tom talks big, but he's dumber than half the cast. He follows his whims and does whatever he wants because he can. The money he hoards lets him do it, free of any consequences for his actions. And his unwillingness to divorce his wife, despite his marriage problems, leads to the plot of this whole story. And then we get to Nick. As a kid, you miss the nuance here about the main character, that he is just as flawed as anyone else in this book. Nick was already in a relationship when he came to West Egg, but at the same time, he was flirting around with Jordan Baker because it was more exciting to him than the girl back home. Nick is nosy and judgmental. He's not honest at all, even if he claims he is. He doesn't even like Gatsby at first, but never says it to his face. He leads on Jordan Baker for at least a couple months, and he never tells Tom what he actually thinks about him. By the end of the story, he vows to never lie to himself again. But he's human after all. Who knows where his story will take him from here. Baker was a nosy and compulsive liar, almost a perfect fit for Nick, but he wises up by the end of the book and calls it off for a try at being an honest man. No one here was a good person. That's life. You can't really see that when you're young, but the nuance builds up as you age. So what does Gatsby represent here? He represents a person who never actually lost the naivety and expectations of youth. Even in his 30s, he still holds on to the dream he used to have when he was 15. That one day he would make himself into a proper businessman and make enough money that he could truly live his happily ever after with Daisy. That this whole time, Daisy was waiting for him to come back, scoop her up and take her away. Like a knight in shining armor, Gatsby would ride in and save the princess, and together they would live happily ever after. This one-sided dream can be seen in Gatsby's awkwardness when faced with the realities of Daisy's life in the 5 years without him. She had a marriage, a love life, she even had a kid without him. That fact clearly disturbed him a little bit when he meets the child. His idealism falls apart piece by piece, with every revelation about the life that Daisy built without him. It reaches a crescendo when he realizes that Daisy can't admit she never loved Tom, because it was untrue. Daisy was in love with Tom at some point, and that's why she married him. She could not wait around for Gatsby forever. She had to move on with her life, and so she did. So then, why does Nick admire Gatsby so? Why is he telling this story of his encounter with the self-made man? Nick admires the purity of Gatsby's dream, and the fact that Gatsby did in fact do the impossible. He turned himself from a simple farmer's boy into a multimillionaire. He had a dream and he pursued it insatiably for many, many years. And he succeeded. Every night he remembered his dream and his love for Daisy. And every night he promised himself to push harder, to reach a place where he could finally live a happy life with her. Unfortunately, his dream was completely one-sided and ended in failure. However, Nick still admires Gatsby for that. He sees himself in Gatsby. He sees his humanity in Gatsby, even though Gatsby came from a lower social class than Nick. And this is someone who even managed to increase that social class, all the way to the ultra-rich. You can see the separation of the social classes represented by the physical separation between the houses on the west and the east sides of the bay. Gatsby chased something incessantly and with all his effort, even when it was impossible, even while lying to yourself that it is possible. And that gets us to the theme of lying to yourself. Basically every character in the story is lying to themselves in one way or another. If not lying, at least being dishonest with the people around them. Tom believes he can have it all and keep both his wife and his mistress happy. This ultimately leads to his marriage issues and 2 innocent deaths. Gatsby believes he can ride in and steal Daisy away, and that she would be happy to come with him. Myrtle believes that Tom would rather leave his wife for her, and doesn't stop to think critically about why he is not doing so. Daisy quietly tries to make herself believe that her current life is okay. More than anything else, she would rather try to make her husband jealous than actually leave him. Jordan is a frequent liar, even willing to fake a ball in a golf tournament. Thinking on all this, Nick has an interesting quote halfway through the story. "I suspect I am a virtue of honesty." However, we know that's not true, mainly because he was cheating on a girl with Jordan. But by the end of the book, it seems Nick learned a lesson. Interacting with all these fake rich people has made him realize something about himself, and makes him leave the East back to the Midwest. His arc concludes with the quote, "I'm 30, 5 years too old to lie to myself and call it honor." Nick is too old to be playing around with girls in his 30s. He needs to settle down, or at the very least not lie to the women around him and pretend he is taking them seriously. And that is the death of innocence in Nick. That is what he learned from Gatsby. Ultimately, Gatsby was lying to himself. Daisy had a kid and a life separate from him. Daisy had moved on, but Gatsby was still stuck in the past. Even if Daisy had married Gatsby instead of Tom, we see from Myrtle that she would have been happy for a while, but miserable after, at the degradation of her quality of life. And who knows, maybe it would have been her having the affair with Tom, not Myrtle. Love is just an emotion, no better or worse than happiness, sadness, excitement, or anger. Over time it fades and it needs active work to be maintained. Otherwise it dissipates, like clouds in the wind. Media has a tendency to idolize love when really it's quite messy. But stories like this made me think, what if it's not media itself that idealizes love, but what if it's us? Was it me? If I can misinterpret The Great Gatsby as your run-of-the-mill tragic love story, how many other stories have I misunderstood the same amount because I was too young to understand the nuance? Or maybe I've lived too long now and I've become cynical about it all. That now everything I see is colored by whatever I'm feeling in the moment. And that's why media means something different to me at different ages. What do you think? About Gatsby? About love? About life?